Welcome to Season 4 of the Knack for Business podcast.
Question for the audience. How do you get your voice out in front of the right audience and turn podcast appearances into real business growth? In this episode, we'll show you how podcast guesting can help you build authority faster, reach ideal clients without paid ads, and position your voice as a trusted expert. We'll also reveal the strategy and audio branding secrets that make listeners remember you and buy from you. And if you're ready to stop blending in and start getting booked, listened to, and paid, stay tuned and let Carl talk to you about how to make every mic moment count. Which leads us to our subject matter expert and guest today, Master Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple. Now, Carl's been in the business for over 25 years, behind the mic in radio and on stage, on global platforms. A 3 times best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and host of the Speaking of Speaking podcast. He also knows how to captivate, teach, and motivate audiences to action. As a founder and CEO of Podcast Solutions Made Simple, Carl helps entrepreneurs launch high-impact podcasts that amplify their message, build authority, and fuel business growth. He's got a proven ability to turn ideas into profitable content and has made him a trusted voice in the industry. He's also a returning guest on the Knack for Business podcast. He's been a guest in the last 3 seasons, and he's also one of the core elements and core reasons that this podcast is up and running and has the structure that it does. So if you like what you're hearing today, Carl's your man. If you don't like what you're hearing today, talk to Wayne. And that's a joke, folks. Carl, welcome. It's good to have you here again, sir. Appreciate it. And do you have a favorite quote or saying you want to share with the audience?
It's good to be back. Quote, it's okay to be invited back to Bernie and Wayne's podcast. How about that for a quote? No,
Like
not that quote.
That one works for me. Yeah.
I do
Wayne's
have
happy.
It's funny. I do have another one though that I use, and it has absolutely nothing to do with podcasting, but I apply this principle to everything I do in business, in life, and it's Dylan Thomas. It's one of my favorite quotes actually from his work. Do not go gentle into that good night. And as I've been embracing business and podcasting more, nothing I do is gentle. It's definitely I'm not going down without a fight, you know what I mean? So I'm really wanting to embrace and get in there, get dirty, have fun doing it, and then really add impact to the people in the world around me. So that's the way I interpret that. I know that's not the interpretation of what the story is about, but that's how I embrace it. Do not go gentle. I mean, go at it. Do what you need to do.
Oh, Wayne, you know what? I'm going to let you lead off this next volley of query and design. Go for it, sir.
Cool. Well, first, I'll start with our origin story. Met Carl. I was having lunch with Carl, and I said, everyone in Kingston already knows what they think about me. I need to expand that. Who can I meet? And he says, have you ever met my friend Bernie? That was 4 years and 400 episodes ago. So thank you, Carl. You really were at the very genesis. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. I'm glad. It looks like a great relationship. You 2 make a great couple. Just saying.
Genesis
I'm
sounds
afraid
very
to break
biblical.
that to Elizabeth. That's my big fear. Actually, you have anyone who's heard you before, you are an ex-radio star.
I don't know about star. I would say maybe a
Well,
local celebrity,
I
but certainly spent 25 years behind the microphone in radio and, definitely enjoyed every step of the journey.
and I watched Angels in the Outfield. I know how this works. So anyway, there's a corporate reorg, and they say, "Carl, you're not needed anymore." The first thing one has is depression and then alcohol. After that, one chooses to reinvent themselves. Tell me about that story.
Oh my goodness. It's happened twice. They say you haven't made it in radio till you've been fired at least once. I was fired twice, so I consider myself an amazing superstar. But honestly, it was between radio gigs, around 2011 that I had a colleague say, "Well, you're good at this Toastmasters thing." At that time, I was very actively involved in Toastmasters and also was winning speech contests and giving good evaluation. Wayne, I know you've been in the Toastmaster seat. Bernie, I don't know about you, but certainly, good evaluations make a big difference. And anyway, they said, you should be a speaker trainer. And I said, okay. So I tried that, got back into radio around 2012, started hearing about this thing called podcasting, still didn't know what it was. but enjoyed that second go around in broadcasting because it was different. It was different because I wasn't just the on air talent. I was learning about the business side of radio. I was learning about programming, promotions, marketing. I had a team. We were learning about strategic planning, all the stuff that most announcers find boring, but I was actually eating it up like it was candy. Then when the pandemic hit, that was the second time to be let go from the radio world, but it was a huge opportunity to embrace something different. Podcasting just made sense at that time. A lot of people were scrambling, reinventing themselves, looking for other ways to connect with their audiences, with their clients. And oh my goodness, all of a sudden, overnight, this online presence became very crucial. It became the lifeline for so many people. So that was sort of how we transitioned from radio to podcasting. And it's been an amazing journey ever since.
So right now, you running a very successful business. You help educate people on how to podcast. You also help someone says, "Listen, I just wanna talk. I want someone else to do the production component," and you do that also very well. But now you're kind of venturing into a couple of new areas. And one is dealing with, "Hi, I want to be a guest. I don't want to run a show." And the other one is, you know what? Here's my jingle. Like, there's certain restaurants that you hear the ad on. You don't even need to see the logo. You already know who it is. So the audio tidbit is already identifiable. Walk us through some of that new adventures that you're getting into and where you at.
Yeah, certainly. Let's start with the guesting piece because I think that's very. I mean, they're both very important, but the guesting piece was something that we fell into because it wasn't even on our radar. I've been working with a client in Germany for the better part of 4.5 years, and I was already doing this for them, but it's not something that we wanted to take on. But it was almost out of necessity. But then, out of morbid curiosity, we thought, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we giving folks the opportunity that we're having conversations with to explore podcast guesting? And everything we do, Bernie, I think you mentioned it off the top. Everything we do is not just haphazard. I mean, we do it with strategy. We approach it with intention, not just spinning the wheel and saying, "Hey, let's do a podcast today." We're actually doing it with purpose. And we started to think about, okay, well, how can we impact to folks who are coming to us, asking us all these questions about podcasting? What if they're not ready to do a podcast yet? Or what if they only want to be podcast guests? So we started to really look at that and explore the podcast guesting world. There are other agencies out there that do this. They do it very well. Some of them have been very well established over the last 20 or so years. And you can tell by how much they charge their clients to do that. And certainly no criticism there at all because they have that credibility behind them. So we said, well, how can we make a difference? And what can we? So we said, okay, well, for colleagues, certainly colleagues, but for folks who are coming to us saying, well, I really have no desire to have a podcast, or at least not yet. Can you get me started? Well, podcast guesting just makes sense because it's a very easy way to start, being exposed to the podcasting world. Strategically, we will help you figure out what it is that you need to say, but then also, what's your problem? What's your not your problem, but what's the problem you solve? What's the solution that you bring? And what's your call to action as opposed to just the basic of give me your email address or here's my website. We really want to have a call to action in mind. So I really started to play with that a little bit more and beta testing it has been just amazing in the sense that we have at the recording of this episode with you. It's late. It's the fall of 2025. We've got 7 clients that love us. They all love us, thankfully, but 7 guesting clients that love us, and we've got another half a dozen or so that are looking at running with us. And again, it's about at a time where, in a lot of ways, we're being social media isn't doing what it used to be, especially Facebook, for example. It's not the same platform it was. There's a lot of fakeness to it. Plus, the algorithms don't make it gentle for us to communicate properly with our audiences. We also have our conventional media that's slowly being eroded. Radio and television is not as approachable, print is disappearing. So being able to leverage podcasting to elevate your brand, your business, and your credibility to put you in that category of one makes sense. If this was 30 years ago, Wayne, and you'd written your book, which I know you've recently written one, by the way, congratulations. I would say, you know what, Wayne, now's where you go on a speaking tour. You go on a book tour, you contact radio stations and television stations, local and wherever, to promote that book. Now it's get on podcasts to do that. So we certainly are seeing the shift there, and we're enjoying the success in that in our own right as we embrace it as well.
Know that you grew from is when you heard no's, they were usually the same no. I love a podcast. I really love Lionel Trains, whatever. But I don't have $5,000 and 4 hours a week to invest in this. What do I do? How, what? And you said, well, would you like to collect with someone? Would you like to do $2,000 and 1 hour a month working with something that the brand is Gananoque or trains or business or dentistry or whatever the collegial group is? And you found that's really exciting. Tell me more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the guesting piece is, if I'm hearing you correctly, I think the guesting piece is being underrated or underappreciated. And that if when you're certainly people are looking at it from a budgetary standpoint when they're getting in, and that's why I think guesting makes sense because you can do it. Yes, you can go to some of the bigger agencies and give them $50,000 and they'll represent you for sure they will. Or you can again check out a company like ours where we're going to do it strategically. We're going to whatever it is the topic is that you're covering, we'll be able to help you get on podcasts whether they're localized, whether they're larger in the sense of like global, and it's going to have an impact on your business because it doesn't matter if it's local, it's going to go out to multiple places. It's going to be heard around the world. The podcast itself, as far as being a host, is very similar. The only thing that's changed, Wayne, is the investment piece as far as as far as our company goes. But it's all about elevating and putting your best face or your best voice forward. And if I can give you the opportunity to do that, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I help you be the person, whether it's your local hero in Gananoque, Kingston, Sealy's Bay, wherever it is, the person that is, you know what, I've got this thing. I've got this Knack for business widget. See what I did there? And I want it to be applied around the world. I want to get on podcasts that are going to help me do that. What if we could spend a year to 18 months doing that? And then after that year to 18 months, after you've, sold $1 million worth of those, have you say, okay, well, now you're the expert, Wayne, Bernie, let's start your own show. There's a good transition. And there's how we're really providing and that support to help individuals like yourselves leverage that.
So when you're working out this guesting piece, and you're going to be a guest on another show, other than "Hi, I'm here," I'll have a conversation. What frame of mind do you want the guest to have? That at the end of the day, okay, I've done this bit, but it's sort of like if you make a sandwich, there are dishes afterwards. There's things you got to do as follow
Mhm.
through. What are the follow throughs? What are the preps? You get the food to make the sandwich, right?
Yeah.
Eat the sandwich, and then clean up after yourself, right? So, but the before and after, what are the things that a guest should be mindful of?
That's a very good question. Firstly, I'll actually take it right back to the very beginning, especially if you are, because what we're doing is we're the agency that's doing the bookings. We're the agency that's doing the reach outs, the exploring of finding out is the Knack for Business podcast the right show for, you know, Susie Sally Dome. I'm just making up names here, apparently. And if it is, how do we reach out to Bernie and Wayne and make it sound like it's Sally reaching out? So how do we personalize the reach outs, even though we're an agency? So that's number one. Once we've done that, we want to make sure that Sally's had the opportunity to listen to even 5 minutes of a show, so she knows what she's getting into. Especially with Wayne, you need to listen probably for more than 5 minutes. Joking, my friend. 5 minutes is good. But then also, what's the expectation? Is there some clerical things or administrative things? Is there a waiver that needs to be signed? Not a waiver, but is there a guesting release that needs to be signed? Does Bernie and Wayne need the headshot ahead of time and the bio and all of those things? We can help manage showing up for the recording on time, putting your best version of yourself forward, not being a jerk, really being of service, not just to Bernie and Wayne, but being of service to the audience. When you're a guest on shows, it's not about you. It's about ultimately the audience. Yes, you're going to share your IP, your insights, all of that stuff, but it's about being of service to the audience. And then once the interview is done, firstly, thanking the hosts in this case and saying, Bernie, hey, Wayne, thanks for putting up with me for the last 30 minutes or whatever. I really appreciate that. What are next steps? What are the next steps that I need to know? And really being a good guest is one who, once the episode is ready, they're ready to do their firstly promote anything that the host is sharing. So most hosts are sharing on LinkedIn, Facebook, other socials too. So being able to like, comment, and share, but then also do your own. And again, I've been on this show a couple of times to know that Bernie and Wayne will send out the information. We'll send, hey, here's an audiogram, or here's a video, or here's the links, making sure that all of those things can go out because it's an extension of the marketing for you as well as for the show. So when you're a guest, think about it as you're being in other people's network, but it's also good for the host to know that you care enough about your appearance to be able to do that. So those are some of the things for sure. Like make sure that you are of service to not only the audience, but then make sure you are there for the host and support them when that episode's going live.
In your 5 years, what has been the most spectacular miss where the guest just clearly didn't have a clue and broke all the rules, and you could tell he had alienated the host? You must have a story.
Most of my guests are pretty good. I have had a situation though where I had a guest and it wasn't that they alienated the host. I think they just really liked to hog the mic. One of the things I learned in radio, especially when you're on location, is you never hand the mic over to the business owner. So if you say, "Hey, it's Carl Richards and we're down at Bernie's Creative Insights Emporium. Bernie, you got a lot of things on sale. Do not hand Bernie the mic. Actually, Bernie's probably okay, but not hand Wayne the mic because they'll go on and on it. So you hang on to that mic. You keep control of the mic as much as you can. It's the same with a podcast. So you keep control of the conversation. Well, I had a guest who I asked them a question and I've learned how to reframe this question. And it's so tell me about and I can't remember the exact words, but so tell me about your origin story. How did you get into this thing? And I think they thought that was the invitation to take the leash and run with it. And 15 or 20 minutes later, when they were just wrapping up the thought, and they even said, I know I can talk for a lot. There was no way to get in there and get the microphone back until they stopped talking. It was very awkward. Goodness for editing. But I remember getting to the end when that individual got to the end and I said, "Well, thank you." And that's the end of the episode. And they chuckled and said, "Oh, I know I went on for quite a while." And I said, "It's okay." And then we kept the conversation going. But that's the only time in the last 5 years that I can recall that there was that awkwardness where I felt like the guest was, I'll say, taking advantage of the opportunity, hogging the mic or hogging the stage, and it's partly my own fault for not reining them in or giving them a little bit more or giving them a better question to lead in, but that's the only example I can think of. I've had some interesting interviews where I go in not knowing how it's going to feel, and I know you guys have probably had this too. But then afterwards I go, "You know what? It really was a magical conversation. Maybe I just wasn't feeling it front." Once you get into the conversation and everyone is it's amazing how things just open up. And especially if you're open to, having some fun along the way. It's not just about here's some hard-hitting questions. It's about having some conversation. It's about having a couple of laughs. It's about, poking Wayne or poking Bernie or whatever, because that's what people really want to listen to. Yeah, they want to hear about your story. Yeah, they want to hear that, but they're quite content to hear the kibitzing or the heckling, gentle, of course, back and forth. Yeah, there you go.
It's interesting as you describe, some people do run with the mic and you just sit back going, that's unfortunate because I have a series of questions because, they'll say something and I have to clarify it for the audience because I have to assume, not everybody understands acronyms and so forth. And Wayne's actually really good at helping spot those words. You'll see someone will say an acronym and going, well, what exactly is that? And either we
Hmm.
don't know or we do know, but no, the audience
Yeah.
won't know. The other piece out of that, would you say if you're going to be a guest, how do you prepare yourself? Make sure you've done your bio break. Make sure you've had enough sleep. Make sure you're not under the influence.
Ideally, yes.
I swear to goodness, there's been a couple of them sitting there going, based on the feedback loop coming in here, I'm going to have to edit this because so I think there's a lost soul that I'm talking to, and I mean they're not staggering through the conversation, but it's like something's not right here. Uh, always keep in mind that this is in posperity's sake, and you
Yeah,
don't want
yeah,
your posterior showing up in the wrong place, so to
true.
speak.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There was a good example of that. I'll just share one of the podcasts that we launched in 2021, one of our earlier shows, and it was called Gin Inspired. So it's a show that's all about gin. Well, there's some legalities as to what you can say and can't say about alcohol in the world of meat. So at the beginning of every episode, the host, it wasn't me, but I was on the show once or twice, and she would say, "Okay, what cocktail are you drinking today?" We weren't actually drinking cocktails, but we would say, or she would say, and her guest would say what they were consuming. So it's as you're talking about making sure you're not, three sheets to the wind as as you're doing your episode. She would start it off, but honestly, there was never, ever, ever a drop touched before or well, maybe after, but no, certainly not before the episode. It was more the smoke and mirrors of we have this social type podcast because it's quite social. Here's what's in my glass today. Here's my gin cocktail. What's your gin cocktail? What are you having? Even in that sense, firstly, know your audience, but then also understand that even if you're implying it, don't be doing it. Right?
Yep.
Sure.
We've had a really good run of folks coming in.
Yep.
Thing I like doing before a guest comes onto a show, as opposed to a cold call, is have a
Hmm.
chat with them
Yep.
ahead of time, so they get to know either myself or Wayne prior, and so they have a sense of where we're at. So I have that kind of a cross connect because it really helps. That way, if we're about to talk about stuff and going, it's not so cool, or it's not the right show, because if to mention a name like, what are the chances of getting on the Joe Rogan show, Carl?
Are you asking me?
Well, rhetorically, yes. In my head, I already kinda know the answer. But what should a guest also understand in that space about being able to get on a show?
Yeah.
And if you can't make a show that you're booked for.
Yeah. So I'll say this. Number one, if you're approaching guesting for the first time, you should always, you should have a wish list. If there are AWS podcasts you want to be on, or Wall Street Journal podcasts, or Joe Rogan, or whatever they are, then by all means, make that your wish list. I mean, we're talking some high profile shows. If you want to be on one of Oprah Winfrey's shows, sure, great. Write it down. Write a list of those shows. Say they're your top 10. Would love to be on these if I ever had the chance. Joe Rogan, it's probably not going to happen. But certainly, I think you want to look at who is your audience? Who is it that you wanna have coming into your ecosystem? Who is your so again, who is your audience? So you wanna be on the shows, you wanna be prepping for the shows that are going to have the most impact, not only for you, but where you can have the biggest impact for the audience. So, for example, I know that I work well with business coaches and business consultants because now those are where my clients are probably having conversation. Right? A number of my clients are likely working with coaches who are saying, you know what, you're at a particular point in your business where the next logical step is to write a book or start a podcast. So obviously, shows related to business, Knack for Business obviously is a great one. Knack for Business was business related shows, business consulting shows, marketing strategy shows. Those would be great ones for me that I could focus and target on. I don't look at audience size. And the reason why I don't look at audience size is there's a guy by the name of Carl Hughes. I'll give this quick example. He went on a podcasting tour 2020, 2021 from there. And his goal was to get on as many shows as he possibly could. Now, some of them were smaller shows, tiny audiences, 15, 20 listeners. Others were large audiences, like the size of your audience now. And by the way, congratulations on all that success that you're enjoying along the way. His goal was to get this tech thing in front of as many audiences as he could. And after a year, it might have been more like 18 months, but after that point, he had taken his business idea that was in its very early stages to $1 million company by intentionally getting on shows that were going to position him to get in front of the right audiences every single time. So think about the shows that are going to have the most impact for you, where you can have the most impact for your audience. That's part of the preparatory work. The biggest thing I'm going to say is, making sure that your messaging is key, making sure your call to action is key. Your call to action shouldn't just be a throwaway. It should be like a checklist, or it should be at least the minimum should be a strategy call. Uh, and if not that, then maybe something like an assessment or an audit, something that is really going to be tangible to help your listeners, or the listeners who are listening to you, tap into your wisdom and ideally book a call with you. That's my take on that. So, but it starts with really getting on the shows where you're going to have that opportunity to do that.
In my notes, I see two words I know both of, but I've never heard them in the same sentence. What is a concierge podcast?
Very good question. One of the things that we've been toying with, I say toying, it's not a toy. It's actually something we're seriously doing. I had a coach approach me, or challenge me rather, I guess about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago. I was doing some work with this individual, and they said, "Here's what I want you to do." And keep in mind that we had come out of a very unfortunate sales slump, just coming out of it, and was really wanting to ramp things back up. And they issued a challenge, and the challenge was create a high ticket offer. And not just high ticket as in, the highest price I've ever charged, because, our services are kind of concierge now. Definitely more, say, than the entry level gig type work. But they said create a six figure. And after I don't know if I threw up in my mouth, or if my mouth went into my stomach. I can't remember which happened first. But after that, I said, okay. So what we started to do was conceptualize an offering where literally Bernie and Wayne just have to show up anywhere in the world. In this case, it would be ideally on. Please don't take the show on the road and force me to go to Australia. Although if you force me, I guess would be okay. But literally show up anywhere in the world and we would be there. And all you have to do is show up, record, and leave. We manage everything else. We would manage the bookings of the guests. We would manage the film crew. We would manage the audio, everything. Plus, of course, all of the graphics, the audio, the editing, all of that behind the scenes. So you're literally just showing up. So that was our first kick at a high ticket offer. And we're still in that place of getting it ready to put it to market for a beta test. But man, oh man, it's been an interesting experience getting the feedback on that, really starting to understand what is it that an executive, because really this is if it's if it's a six-figure offer, it's not for somebody who's just starting a business. It's for someone who is running a $2 to $20 million company or more, that understands that they need to be the face of their business or the face of their company, and this is going to help them do that. What do they need? Well, they need me to be there where they are. They need a film crew. They need whatever it is they need, and here's what we're going to give them. Concierge end to end, just like when you go to a concierge in a hotel, they can help you do everything from hail a taxi to go on a museum tour to you're looking for a restaurant because you want to have breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, coffee, whatever it is, you go to your concierge. We can also represent you in the podcasting space much the same way with that concierge service, which is almost ready to be beta tested. So good, great question. Thanks, Wayne.
So We touched on this earlier about audio branding. Two things come to mind. One is as a podcast guest. Maybe it's the wrong word, but the branding, like my sound bite, how I say things. Do I allow for an air gap between conversations so the editor doesn't have to go, you know, utter certain words of profanity and going, I can cut this and I can shape this, honest, to the jingle, so because it's all in its entirety, it's an audio brand, right? You might even have a catchphrase. Like, I mean, there's certain comedians, they had a certain style, right? Even how they
Yeah.
express themselves, that was an audio
Yeah.
brand. Tell us more about the audio branding and how you built that out.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that, Bernie. And you're right. Editors love when they have to. And I don't know what, you know, what words they use in the studio. I know what words I've used in the past. I could never say them on air and radio, though. Well, actually, no, I could say them once and only once at that particular radio station. Then I'd never say them again. But seriously, though, audio branding, or I've sonic branding, as you said, but I've really simplified it by saying audio branding is this can be a reflection as a guest, but I wanna take it to a little bit further as a host, and I want you to think of it as a business, though. I want you to think of it as a business owner, because most of us as business owners, we know what our brand looks like. Logos, fonts, colors, graphics. We have a clear understanding of what our brand looks like. What does our brand sound like? When you ask that question to most people, most business owners will say, I've never thought about, tell me more. Usually it's the question that it's followed up with. So when you start to think about audio branding, it's what's the sound behind your brand? And it really needs to match, because if it doesn't, if it's mismatched, it can really have an impact. Well, it can have an impact regardless, but you want it to have the right impact. Let me give you an example of that. Let's say, for example, you are running you're running a funeral home. You're thinking, you know what? I need some music as people are coming in to the home to pay their respects. Well, imagine if the music you heard or the background that you heard was hard metal or heavy rock. It wouldn't make sense. It would be the wrong kind of vibe that you would want, right? I'll give you another example. A sports podcast, all about sports, high energy, a little bit gritty, but you hear this light, airy lullaby in the back. Wouldn't make sense, right? So it really needs to match. And it's not about what Bernie and Wayne like musically. That might play in a little bit, but it's what audio or what sound does your ideal client or prospect identify. I'll give you a good example, a couple of quick examples of this. We know this from the business world already because there are brands that are already good at this. McDonald's, da 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 da. I'm loving it. When we hear that, we identify with that as being McDonald's. Da da. Netflix. When you fire up your Netflix, it makes that ta-da sound. What is the identifiable sound that your brand needs to have that allows you to stand out? And why is audio branding important? At the end of the day, there's so much noise out there. You want to be in that category of one. I think I've said that already today. And if you're not the go-to, what is it you need to do? And certainly visuals, yeah, they're good, but what is the sound? What is the vibe behind the brand that is yours that no other brand has? And that's the challenge with the podcasting space is there's so much royalty-free music and sound bites out there. We can just use those, right? Yes, you can, but they're not identifiable to your brand. The audience doesn't necessarily identify with the mind. So that's what audio branding is. And we're having a lot of fun starting to explore that more deeply with clients. It's not just about the music either. It's about other sound bites that we can add. So for example, we got Santa Claus. Don't tell Mrs. Claus, but we brought Santa Claus in a couple of years ago as a client. And guess what? Santa Claus needs what? Jingle bells behind him. So we had a jingle bell or a sleigh bells soundtrack behind his show, as opposed to just something seasonal related. So think about that with your own brand and how it's going to add impact. And is it time to consider, especially if you are running that company that you want to put out there, is it time for it to have its own identifiable audio brand.
You've been doing this for a while now.
Thank you.
Yes. And I'm sure that when you started, not only were you green, but your industry was different. What would you say is something to make sure you're not dated or stale 2 years from now that you're seeing to be cautious about?
That's a really good question. I mean, podcasts were in diapers back in the early 2000s, and I don't think we would have been able to forecast where things would go even 10 years into the future with you know, who would have thought in 2002 we would be carrying a computer in our pocket? Basically, that's what your smartphone is, right? Who would have thought that that's what we'd be carrying around? Literally a computer where we can do anything. You know what? That's what we do now. Who would have thought that we would be in a place where something like music would become so portable other than what we consider it to be, radios made it portable, smaller CD Walkmans and things like that made it portable. But I mean, really portable, where you're not carrying the physical music with you. You're carrying literally a device with 10,000 songs on it. That doesn't matter where you go, you can listen to it. Podcast episodes right here. You want to listen to Bernie and Wayne? They're right here. Who'd have known that? Who would have known in 2020 that this thing called AI would surface that would make it easier for the average person looking at podcasting to not only get into podcasting, but then also put out a good product. There are so many AI tools out there now that make it easier for podcasters to edit. Descript is one. Bernie, I think you use Descript on a regular basis. That's one. But there are other products too and other tools that make it so much easier. Where this is going is I still think there will always be a need for higher quality production and things like that. And again, keep in mind, if you're looking at a concierge approach to podcasting, you're not going to be wondering, I wonder if they're using Descript. You're not going to be asking that question. Again, you're showing up, hitting record, or you're not even hitting record. We are. You're showing up, talking, and leaving. You don't care about what's going on. But for the people coming into podcasting, what we're going to see, I think, is a huge uptick in AI. But I think we're also going to see the humanity or the authenticity attached to it be very relevant as well. Because I think as we get further away from it through our AI journey, we need to come back to it to make sure that even if we're leveraging all of these AI tools to make things easier and quicker for us to get to an end product, that we haven't abandoned the humanity or the authenticity about who we are. And keep in mind too that people don't do business with technology. People do business with people. So that personality, that still needs to come forward. So, but I still think we're going to see a lot of tools. I think we'll see some disappear. The ones that are, they say only the strong will survive. I think the strong ones will remain, and the others that aren't so strong will fade into the sunset, so to speak. But I think we'll see people still wanting to have authentic conversation with people because at the end of the day, that's who's doing the business.
Quick question. What's the funniest event that's ever happened? Or the most unique event while you've been recording? Other than the person grabbing the mic and just going running with it.
That's a good question. Does this show count? Oh,
We are recording a video version of this too, by the way, but but none of us are wearing clown hats.
it's funny you mentioned that because I was on a podcast. It wasn't me recording it, but I was on a podcast and it was the host was doing their own version of Jeopardy. So they did that for the first 10 minutes. I don't know if they obviously didn't call it Jeopardy because that's probably trademarked, but their own version of it. And then they broke into the individual conversations with the contestants who were the guests that day. But I don't even remember what the questions were, but that was probably the most unique thing that I've been a part of in recording was that. That was pretty wild, and it was virtual. It wasn't in person. It was virtual. But I very much enjoyed that. It was a pretty cool experience. I had no idea going in what this was going to be like. I'm like, "I've never been on Jeopardy." And I don't think I lost. I think we all tied for how somehow that happened in this particular version of it. But it was quite the experience, and I liked the unique approach. I give the host 2 thumbs up for that because as opposed to just doing a regular show, doing something that was unique and different, right up their alley. So that was probably the most interesting thing that I've had happen.
Tell me, how big a panel do you think is 3, is 2, is when is a panel too big for a podcast, in your opinion?
That's a good question. And again, to me, this goes to experience with the host. If you are, and again, this is not to toot my own horn, but having spent 25 years in radio broadcasting, I'm pretty comfortable managing a 4-person, even a 5-person panel of experts on a show. If you're new, managing you and a co-host and maybe another person might be a little bit of a stretch. Because at the end of the day, if you're the quarterback of the podcast, if you are the main host, you need to be able to not regale, but rein people back in so that you keep the conversation moving forward. But also think about how interesting is it to your audience, to your listeners? How confusing could it possibly be to your listeners if you're trying to do too much? So if you're trying to do a panel of 10, or you're saying or you're trying to do all of the remaining cast members from Star Trek: The Next Generation and Star Trek: The Original Series on a panel. There's still a few of them still alive. That would be interesting to manage from a podcasting perspective without an experienced host to keep it moving forward and to keep the panel light and exciting. So I would say don't do what you're not ready for. If you're with a co-host, and I know you guys obviously are, Bernie, I know you co-host on another show as well. Do what you're good at. And then when you're ready to go to the next level, that's when you can add another element. And if it's another person, so for example, a round robin discussion with 2 or 3 other people to this show, you guys are probably ready to do that and have some fun with it. And I would encourage you to do that. But if you're brand new to the game, I would consider doing some episodes yourself, then expanding to either guests or co-hosting. Enjoy the journey from there.
Well, if you're in the audience and this resonates, and you either have been thinking, I really should try to get on a couple of podcasts, or you know what, I'm ready to bite the apple and be a podcaster, and you want to talk. How do we get a hold of you, Carl?
That's a great question. I encourage you to schedule your podcast strategy session with me. That's where we're going to review what it is that you're looking to do with podcasting. Is it guesting? Are you ready to be a host? What is it that you're looking to accomplish? A little bit about your goals, and we'll be able to, in a 20 to 30-minute session together, assess that. And that's simply by going to my website, podcastsolutionsmadesimple.com. There's a button that says get started, and it takes you right to that spot where you can schedule your podcast strategy session and then take the first step in getting into this crazy industry. I say crazy in a fun and a good way. There are many opportunities there, and I'm just happy to have a conversation with you about that and what your goals are.
You know what, Carl? I want to say thank you so much for being a guest here today. Much appreciated. Wayne Pratt, thank you. But especially you, the Knack for Business listeners. It's critical to understand what happens behind the scenes, especially if you want to get involved in these scenes. And if you want to get involved in the podcasting space, whether to be a guest, maybe dabble and understand how to build a podcast, reach out to Carl because that's what he does. He'll help guide you along. And he's a really good, friendly demeanor to the whole process, and it's enjoyable. All right, and we've worked with Carl. Geez, now over almost close to 4 to 5 years. So, and we're smiling. Wayne and I are not looking at each other like going, I got to hammer that guy's head, or conversely, the other way around.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVISIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster. where Bernie is a co-host, Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space, then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motivate You, Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.